Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. The theme of today's lecture is historical periods and styles in classical music. We will be talking about development of musical theories and styles throughout time, from antiquity to today. And we'll be listening to short musical examples from different periods and looking at artworks. When we talk about classical music, we understand it to mean the deep essence of the musical piece, containing in its core the same ethical, religious, and philosophical problems that are contained in the works of artists, theologians, and writers. Traditions of classical music have their roots in the history of the ancient Greece and Rome. Music of that time survived only in stone writings on columns and tombs. Letters of Greek and Phoenician alphabet were used for musical notation. On your screen, you see the papyrus with music notation over the lines of the poem. Here, you see a column music notations about text. I'm a stone reflection. See, Achilles placed me here, a long-lasting symbol of undying remembrance. We can form a view of the musical culture of ancient Greece from art. Some period vases contain images of musical instruments, and from literature, works on music by Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. For example, Plato wrote, "Music is a moral law. It gives a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, a charm to sadness, gaiety and life to everything. It is essence of order and leads to all that is good and just and beautiful." Myth about legendary Orpheus tell us about the magical power of music. By his playing cithara and singing, he won over the Greeks, changed the hearts of barbarians, and tamed wild beasts. Music played an important role in the lives of ancient Greeks. It was played at weddings, feasts, wars, and funerals, was an integral part of religious ceremonies and theatrical performances. During antiquity, musicians did not have musical education, and their art was based on improvisation. Creation of the first musical school, founded by poet Archilochus. He dated around year 650 BC. Greek's musical system was based on tetrachord. Tetra means four, chord, string. Conjunction of two tetrachords forms an octave scale, which, depending on higher or lower pitch of one of the sounds, gets different emotional color. On this basis, there appeared modes. Mixolydian, from B to B, Lydian, from C to C, Phrygian, from D to D, Dorian, from E to E, Hippolydian, F to F, Hypophrygian from D to D, and Locrian or Hippodorian from A to A. Certainly, all musicians recognize Lydian as the major and Locrian or Hippolydian as the minor. These modes were described by the philosopher Pythagoras and his school, 6th century BC, who had first combined cosmology, mathematics, natural science, and aesthetics, and have started to study arithmetical relationships that govern musical sounds, proportions on which musical intervals are based, and relationship between the length of the string and sound pitch. Ratios that define the shapes and size of Greek temples, intervals between the columns, and interrelations between parts of the facade are the same ratios as exist between the musical intervals. This is Parthenon. On the right side of the temple, you can see 8 columns representing an octave scale. The space between the columns matches intervals between the sounds. The front of the building has 16 columns. There are more columns inside, representing different modes. Idea of musical harmony closely interplays with the rules for the sake of creating beauty. Understanding of the universe as the whole, organized and governed by one and only law. This means that the world was thought of as a shape, and Greeks have clearly equated shape and beauty, including beauty of light and color. With development of music, there appeared theoretical works of Aristoxenus, elements of harmony, and Ptolemy, harmonics. That was 2nd century BC, and later of Aristides Quintilianus, Perimusicus, 3rd or 4th century AD. The main musical instruments in ancient Greece were the strings lyre and cithara. Greek lyra is a curved wooden shape with vertical strings, usually no more than four, that play a tetrachord. Cithara is similar to lyre, but it has a flat resonator and may have up to 18 strings. Sound of cithara in Greeks' opinion aroused sublime feelings and embodied divine inspiration. It's not by chance that the most skillful cithara player was the god Apollo. Wind instruments were also widely used. Flute, which according to a myth was invented by the goddess Athena, and earthly swords that combined the skill arousing adoration and passion and instinct embodying unknown dangers. Greeks have also used a pan flute or syrinx that contained several pipes of different length. According to a myth, it was invented by Pan, deity of forests, fields, and herds. He fell in love with the forest nymph Syrinx, but the beauty had only fear of him. To flee from him, she ran to the river, and the river nymphs transformed her into a water reed. Pan cut several reeds, placed them in parallel next to one another, and bound together, calling the instrument by the name of his beloved. In the sound of this flute, the Greeks felt deep passion, inner drama, and thereof comes the myth. Greeks also used aulos, a wind instrument with sound produced by a reed, a special mouthpiece inserted into a hole. We may consider this instrument an ancestor to modern oboe, clarinet, and bassoon. On ancient vessels, aulos players were usually depicted at feasts and festivals. The bright, sharp sound of aulos was thought to enhance temperament and sensuality. Percussions served the same purpose. Tambourine, cymbals, metal plates, sistrum, a rattle, and special clapper for the dancers, cratallum. In rituals for Dionysus, god of grapes and wine, percussions were often held by nymph, the god's companions. One of the most significant inventions of the time was the water organ, hydraulis. It was the first in the world keyboard instrument that was invented by Ctesibius in the 3rd century BC. The keyboard consisted of 24 keys that connected bronze air supply valves to unequal in length musical pipes, which produced 2 complete octaves. The hydraulis is the forerunner of the contemporary church organ and the other keyboard instruments. We now leave the sophisticated, freedom-loving Greece and move to proud and mighty Rome, time of new discoveries, wonderful travels, and great conquests. The music of ancient Rome developed under the influence of Greek culture and aesthetics. Romans used all Greek instruments, but have also invented their own metal wind instrument that gave extra solemnity to triumphant processions, parades, and military marches. It's a Roman tuba, long stride trumpet, buccina, horn-shaped instrument, and litus, curved war trumpet used as the signal instrument. There was also religious music, songs of Salih, and the Arval Brethren, priestly orders of 12 priests. At harvest festivals, Salih, Carmen Saliare, helmeted priests with spears and swords in hands, danced to the sounds of trumpets and song. Arval brethren prayed to the gods for good harvest and prosperity for the community. Literature of ancient Rome continues the Greek tradition, but tales of gods and heroes turn into narratives about events of Roman history with Romans as characters. At the times of early republic, poetry did not exist in Rome neither as a profession nor as a word to describe it. Later, during the late Republic, poetry becomes important and respected. These were the times of Catullus and Lucretius, the golden age of Roman poetry, epoch of Emperor Augustus. Poetic verses were performed accompanied by string instruments. Poet Horace called his odes words that have to sound with strings in a singing voice. In theater, the most popular genre was the pantomime, performed by dancer soloists, accompanied by instruments and choir. Much later, this became ballet and opera. Romans have held musical competitions as part of Capitoline games. In Roman Empire, musical education was general. For example, Emperor Nero himself took part in musical competitions as the singer and actor, and would always lay up claim for the first prize. The profession of music teacher was honored and well respected. Historical period that came after the ancient world is called the Middle Ages. It started with the fall of Rome in year 476 and lasted for more than 1,000 years. During this time, large part of European nations and states was formed, as well as many very important parts of the European culture. Christianity became the foundation of the European life. Art of the Middle Ages, church architecture, sculpture, icons, mosaics, and frescoes that filled the church spaces followed and served the needs of Christian worship. Music perhaps had one of the hardest roles. It had to help the worshipper to abandon and forget their daily toils and troubles, forget personal feelings, and concentrate on biblical text and church sacraments. Chants served this goal, and the main characteristic of this for a long time was monophony, one voice, and absence of instrumental accompaniment. Monophony was the symbol of one God and one church. Musical phrases of the chants, lingering without abrupt changes in melody, with even rhythm, carry within them serenity and at the same time rhythmic, focused movement. They convey inner, prayerful work of the soul in communion with God and are in perfect harmony with the Catholic Church architecture, all details of which underline this steady movement in a straight line from the entrance to the altar. Until the beginning of the 13th century, church music was only written in monasteries. Whilst composing a chant, a monk would strictly follow the canon, the rules, and tradition, and did not even consider himself an author, because the only creator, in his understanding, was God, and he, the monk, was only realizing God's design. For this very reason, most of the musical pieces of this period are anonymous. But at the beginning of the 7th century, all chants were collected and organized under the title Gregorian Antiphonary, after the Pope Gregory I. This collection became the foundation for development of one of the styles of the European church music, Gregorian chant. In Gregorian music, there was a special system of notation of the chants. At first, they were marked with special signs, neumes, from the Greek breath, that described the general direction of the melody without the details that performer had to know himself. Two different color lines were drawn denoting the pitch of the sound, and neumes were written on or around these lines. In the beginning of 11th century, musician and theorist Guido of Arezzo had added two more lines and names for the main sounds, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and later si from the first letters of Sancte Ioanne. This was a predecessor to the modern music notation, where ut is changed to do and fifth line is added. By 30th century, polyphony established itself. It didn't only carry spiritual ideas like monophony, but had also expressed a richness of human thought. Polyphony appeared under strong influence of scholastics, from Greek scholarly learned, school of theology stating that human mind may understand and explain truth of faith. Universities, not monasteries, became centers of scholastic theology and musical life, as a rule concentrated in big university cities. As time went by, masters began to actively use musical instruments to accompany polyphonic singing. New musical instruments appear: woodwind drum horn, curved horn, and shawm, straight reed, with different octave ranges, bowed string instruments, rebec and viol, having from 2 to 5 strings, as well as plucked instruments, harp and zither. New musical genres are born, such as cantate and motet, for example, in the works of the French composer Guillaume de Machaut. Fluorescence of professional secular music is mainly linked to the culture of chivalry, military aristocracy of 12th, 13th centuries, art of troubadours, art de trova, art of composing, and trouver, to find in France, and art of German lyric poets and musicians, Minnesingers, singers of love. Their art developed under the influence of folk tradition. However, they gave softness and sophistication to the bold folk intonations. Rhythms of the compositions, even in quick tempo, kept their elegance and regularity, and form was thoughtful and proportional. Music of the troubadours had many genres. One important genre was the epic works under the name of Song of Deeds, chanson de geste. Usually, these were composed to the lyrics of epic 12th century poem, Song of Roland, describing campaigns of Charlemagne and the tragic fate of his knight and nephew Roland.
Plaît-vous ouïr de grandes batailles et de forts étours, de l'armée d'une dressara d'ours, pour y prière vers lui notre amour, mais d'Aguiliam la prit vers lui fort sourd, tant qu'il aussi l'archant par grand tour, souvent combattit la jampaille dure, si perdit de ses hommes les médures, et souvenez-vous d'Avivien le trou, pour qu'il ou tout dans un corps grand douloureux, l'une dit à l'être, où elle commence la chanson d'Iliade. L'une dit à l'être, Dreta orange les païens de la terre, vont chassant sur le bon marché Guignam, vite à la porte ne trouve ami ouvert, c'est le nom le porte l'on va appeler, pour y porter, frère les mêlés entrés. Qui êtes-vous? C'est Guillaume Alcuris, dit le porter, servez-vous n'y entrez. C'est la vraie à madame comtesse, va donc frère cigarne de Maurice, et il monte les grands madrines de Gris. Annie Guibourg par la fée que des dieux, passe le porte à d'une chevalière, ou par les grands.
Soft and gentle pastorales, shepherdess, painted idyllic pictures. Later, on their basis will appear pastoral, a form of art depicting unity of man and nature. There were also morality songs, pensions. However, the main theme in music and poetry of the troubadours was the theme of love, and the main genre was songs of dawn, chansons de l'aube.
Chanterai pour mon courage que je veux le réconforter, car avec mon grand dommage ne vu elle mourir et affolée. Quand de la terre sauvage ne voit nul lui retourner, Utsire qui m'assuage.
Renaissance marks a turning point in cultural history of European people. In Italy, the winds of change began between 13th and 14th centuries; in other European countries, in 15th and 16th centuries. During Renaissance, man, his happiness and his right to free personal development was considered the supreme value. This worldview became known as the humanism, from Latin humanus, the human. Humanists searched for their ideas of harmonic man in antiquity, and ancient Greek and Roman art served as an example for their own art. This aspiration to revive the culture of antiquity gave name to this epoch: Renaissance, rebirth, a period between Middle Ages and modern time. The art of Renaissance and its music reflects its worldview to the fullest extent. In this period, in this Middle Ages, the leading position was held by vocal church music. Advent of many-voiced singing gave birth to polyphony, from Greek many sounds. In this type of singing, all voices are equal. Polyphony not only made compositions more complex, but it also let the author express personal interpretation of text and gave music larger degree of emotion. Polyphonic composition was created according to complex and rigid rules, and demanded that composer had deep theoretical, philosophical, theological knowledge and virtuoso skill. Both church and secular genres developed within polyphony. With coming of Renaissance, playing different instruments at home became popular in Italy. There appeared societies of music lovers. In professional field, two main schools were formed: Venetian and Roman. Giovanni da Palestrina, one of the most prominent composer of the time, became the head of Roman school. His music is influenced with luminous worldview. His compositions amazed listeners with their combination of complexity and elegance. Each voice in his chants develops on his own, but forms a union with all others, combining into chords of amazing beauty. Often, the melody of the high voice soars above the others, forming a cupola of polyphony. All voices are smooth and well developed. During Renaissance, the Mass becomes the main liturgy of the Catholic Church as the single multi-part composition. A new secular genre also appears: a madrigal, matricale, song in native tongue, based on shepherd songs. Composer wrote more than 100 masses and madrigals. Another school of Renaissance music is linked to the works of Venetian school composer Adrian Villard. If Palestrina's works are characterized by clarity and resistance, Villard and his followers were developing a lavish choral style. To achieve volumetric sound and play of timbres in their compositions, they used several choirs located in different parts of the church. Call and response between the choirs filled the whole volume of the church with unprecedented echoes effect. This approach reflected humanistic ideals of the time, with its cheerfulness, freedom, and striving for everything bright and unusual. Musical language of Venetian school became more complex, filling up with bold combination of chords and unexpected harmonies. During Renaissance, many new musical instruments appeared: viola d'amore, viola da gamba, viola da braccio. The lute became the most popular. In France, 15th and 16th century were the time of important changes. The Hundred-Year War with England has ended. By the end of 15th century, the unification of the state was complete. In the 16th century, the country went through religious wars between Catholic and Protestants. In strong state with absolute monarchy, the role of court festivals and folk feasts became prominent indeed. This facilitated growth of art and music. There appeared more vocal and instrumental ensembles, capellas and consorts. During military campaigns in Italy, the French became familiar with Italian culture. They accepted ideas of Italian Renaissance, humanism, striving for harmony with the world, and enjoyment of life. If in Italy Renaissance was mostly related to the Mass, French composers, along with the church music, paid much attention to the secular polyphonic songs, chansons. In France, interest for chanson appeared in the first half of the 16th century, with publication of collection of music pieces by Clement Jacquin.
Réveillez-vous, car endormis, les yeux d'amour vous sont. Réveillez-vous, car endormis, les yeux d'amour vous sont. À ce premier jour de mai, oiseaux feront merveille, pour vous mettre hors des délais, tous les car la saison est bonne. Vous serez tous en Jérémie, car la saison est bonne. Car la saison est bonne. Vous aurez à mon avis une musique que fera lever mon vie. Vous êtes sonné de Paris. Cette tête Dieu qu'elle a ma passémina. Sans sonner de Paris, ce j'ai compris bien appris. Il est temps sans sonner de Paris, redire ce mot de vie. Chacun s'y abandonne. Redire ce mot de vie, ce mot de vie. Chacun s'y abandonne.
Another school of French music is related to Reformation. In church liturgy, the French Protestants, Huguenots, rejected Latin texts and polyphony. Sacred music became more open and democratic. One of the prominent examples of this musical tradition was Claude Godemel, author of psalms on biblical texts and Protestant chorals.
Puis s'oublier ma
cultural life of England during Renaissance is closely linked with establishment of Church of England. Its influence on music was very strong. Oxford and Cambridge universities established music departments. In aristocratic salons, keyboard instruments were played: virginal, a type of harpsichord, and small organ. Little pieces for playing at home became popular. A prominent representative of this musical culture was William Byrd, publisher of music scores, organist, and composer. He became the forefather of the English madrigal. Main features of Byrd's compositions are simplicity, original form, and harmonic freedom. In composition for virginal, he used motifs from folk songs and dances. Byrd desired for his music to happily bring in only a little tenderness, recreation, and pleasure. This is how he introduced one of his music collections. In 16th century, Reformation began in Germany and changed religious and cultural life of the country. Musicians during Reformation were convinced that they needed to change musical content of the church services. There were two reasons for this. By the middle of the 15th century, polyphonic skills of sacred music composers has reached extraordinary complexity and sophistication. Their works, because of their melodic richness of voices and voluminous chants, could not be accepted and spiritually experienced by most people. Also, the services were in Latin, not understood by most Germans. With advent of Martin Luther, requirements for church singing were as follows: simplicity and clarity of melody, even rhythm, defined form of chant. In 1522, Luther translated the Bible to German. Luther himself and his friend, music theorist Johann Walter, picked melodies for chorals. Another page of German Renaissance music is related to the works of the Meistersingers, songmasters. Poets-singers from the artisan class, they composed their songs according to the strict canon. Creative initiative was restricted by many rules. Novices had to first learn these rules, then learn performing, then compose text to other people's music. Songs of renowned Meistersingers and Minnesingers served as example to follow. Hans Sachs was a prominent Meistersinger of 16th century, and he composed sacred and secular songs, and had also reached fame as a playwright.
Wo das Haus nicht bauet der Herr, so arbeiten umsonste. Alle, die daran bauen sehr, wo nicht der Herr durch Gunste. Selber beten ist die Stadt durch sein Bauung gut und genaht, so wacht umsonst der Wächter. Umsonst ist, dass ihr froh aufstaht und Arbeit lang in Schwere. Und esset das hartselig Brot, dann wem es gund der Herre. Dem gibt er's schlafend Sänft und Lind, das Erb vom Herren sein die Kind, der Lohn die Frucht des Leibes.
Netherlands is a historical area in the northwest of Europe, which includes territories of modern Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, and northwestern France. By the 15th century, the Netherlands have reached high social and economic level. Netherlandish polyphonic mass, one of the important music developments of the Renaissance, was born here. For the art development in the 15th century, interaction between artists from different countries was very, very important. In this way, Netherlands school has absorbed traditions from Italy, France, and England. Guillaume Dufay has laid the foundation of Netherlandish polyphonic traditions. Whilst travelling in Italy, he composed ballades and motets. Whilst in France, he composed music for celebrations and official ceremonies. Later, when he became a priest, he was the first of the composers to compose the Mass as the whole musical composition. Many of Dufay's masses are inspired and full of internal life. Often, composing masses, Dufay took a well-known melody and added his own melodies to it. Such borrowing was one of the characteristics of the Renaissance music.
Gloria in excelsis Deo.
Netherlandish polyphonic school of the second half of the 15th century is represented by Josquin des Prez, who has strongly influenced the composer of the next generation. He traveled much and composed much. His compositions have been well received in wide circles. He composed not only sacred music, but also secular, loved by both aristocracy and common folk. He turned to the genre of Italian folk song "frottola" from "frotta" means crowd, which is characterized by dance rhythm and quick tempo. We complete our history of the Renaissance Netherlandish music with Orlando Lasso, called King of Music by his contemporaries. He studied all the best works created by his forerunners, Netherlandish, French, German, and Italian composers, and used their experience in his works. An extraordinary individual, Lasso tried to change the character of church music and had sometimes used folk songs and dances, bringing sacred and secular music traditions together. In Lasso's music, polyphonic complexity is combined with a great emotionality. His madrigals expose emotional states of the characters. For example, Tears of St. Peter, written to 20 poems by the Italian poet Luigi Transillo. Netherlandish polyphonic school had great influence on development of European music culture. Its polyphonic principles became universal and were subsequently used by many composers. Renaissance, with its drive to revive the traditions of ancient Greece and Rome, was succeeded by the epoch of style and beauty. Pompous, elegant, sophisticated, possessing subtle sense of humor and refined sensuality. Baroque period, which I would like to talk about in the next part of this lecture.